Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem in any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Chris Baker is a lifelong swimmer, educator and writer. After spending much of his professional life overseas, Chris was lured back to Sydney by its beautiful beaches, superb municipal pools, wild swimming holes and world-famous ocean baths. Today I'm talking to Chris Baker about his new book, Swimming Sydney, A Tale of 52 Swims. Chris, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you very much, Greg. A pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Swimming is many things to different people. What is it to you?
As I say, swimming is Sydney. I was away overseas for a number of years, and I came back to Sydney, and pardon the pun, felt a bit like a fish out of water. So as I tried to get a sense of what Sydney was and what made Sydney tick, I kept finding myself coming back to the water. And interestingly, I've never really lived by the coast in the time that I've lived in Sydney. I've been in the inner west and I've been in the inner city and I've been south, but I've never actually lived on the harbour or on a beach. But every time I thought about Sydney when I was away, my imagination went to the blue waters. And there was something about the swirling waters of Sydney, the harbour, the coastline, the rivers, that kept defining this place to me. So when I came back, I felt most at home actually in the waters of Sydney. And I asked myself, why was that? And I think that the waters reveal a lot about Sydney-siders, but they also reveal a lot about the city. I think there's a sense that swimming not only enhances our sense of well-being in this beautiful city where nature's been so generous, but it also has a lot to do with our sense of our identity and our attachment to place in the city. I think we also form a sense of community and we nurture that sense of community through swimming and through our swimming pools. I'm thinking about things like swim squads, hanging around a backyard pool for a barbie on a hot summer's night, taking the kids to their first learn to swim classes. So I think it sets us apart from other people in other cities in the way perhaps that people that grow up in an alpine environment get a sense of who they are and what they are by the mountains that hover around the place where they live. So for me, swimming is experiencing Sydney in its full. It means immersing myself literally in the water, but it also means connecting to a part of myself that I can't reach in ways other than swimming, and also connecting to other people. So I think the other thing that sums up swimming for me in Sydney is the number of stories that surface when we're in the waters of Sydney. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those as we talk about other chapters in the book.
Absolutely. A very interesting term that you bring up, a German word, Heimat, very difficult term to translate. What's its connection to Sydney?
I mentioned Heimat. It's a German word and loosely and badly translated, I guess it probably means a sense of place or where one belongs. But I think the Germans would agree that Heimat has all sorts of resonance. It means not only where you're from, but the feelings, the ephemeral things that come from that place where you grow up. And as I say, for me, my Heimat in Sydney is the blue water. It's the coasts. It's the sky that's reflected in the sea. It's the ripples. It's the sense of joy. It's a sense of nostalgia for going to the beach as a little kid and floating on a canvas surf mat. It's a connection to family. It's memories with friends. It's university days going down to the beach with buddies after a day's lecture. And it's also, I think, a sense of letting go. In Elsa Piper's beautiful book, For Life, she says that if we allowed the water to hold us, we can also allow life to hold us. And I think there's something about the waters of Sydney that give us a liberty and a freedom and a permission to be our best selves and to be at one with nature, but also just to be liberated and to have this sense of freedom. So for me, my Sydney Heimat are the blue waters of Sydney, and it doesn't really matter whether they're the northern beaches or the beaches in the Royal National Park in the south, or the wild swimming in places like Glenbrook. There's something about the sandstone, the water, the colours, the texture, the sounds the underwater life that's so incredibly rich. And all of that, I think, is my sense of Heimat and my sense of belonging in Sydney.
Your 52 swims take us to virtually every point of the compass, but let's start with something east and Clovelly, one of my favourites, of course, and the favourites of many people, populated by many foreigners, as you write. As much as I love it myself, it's basically just a big concrete slab by the water with very friendly fish. Those giant blue and green gropers who, for some strange reason, seeking human affection. I'm amazed by that moment when they sort of roll over and invite you to stroke them. It's a wonderful experience, but it's also got an interesting social history and with regard to things like mixed swimming and sunbathing.
Yeah, so Clovelly was actually the first beach in the Sydney area where daylight mixed swimming was allowed. So prior to that, in the very early 20th century, if people wanted to swim, they had to do it out of daylight hours, and it was gender segregated. And interesting, that was one of the reasons why the ocean pools of Sydney were developed. So, for example, places like Bronte Pool were built to give people an opportunity to bathe modestly in a gender segregated way. But Clovelly changed all that. So when daylight swimming and gender mixed swimming was allowed, Clovelly was the first place where that happened. As you say, it is a strange place. I always find it's a bit like a submarine dock. It's got these very severe uh, cement walls, and I wouldn't be surprised if a James Bond submarine suddenly docked at one of those walls. But yet, as you say, there's something very special about Clovelly, and it certainly has a lot to do with the underwater life and the incredible abundance, what we see, and the way that as you say, the fish allow us to come up so close. But I think there's a lot of people watching that goes on in Clovelly too, and that's another reason why I like it. It's a bit unusual too, in that it's a very safe, controlled swimming environment, and that might be why lots of people from countries that aren't used to the surf, like Australians, seek it out and call it as a favorite. I know a lot of Europeans love Clovelly because it's a little bit like maybe a port beach that you'd find on a Greek island or in the south of France. And so there's something familiar about people lolling on beach towels on the stone and the cement that recalls, I think, a Mediterranean beach rather than a Pacific beach. But I agree, it's something very special, something very strange and unique. And even though it's very close, really, to a big population base in the eastern suburbs, there's something also very natural and beguiling about Clovelly. It faces directly out to the open ocean. So even though it's very safe, it has this great expansiveness that makes it special and beautiful.
That concrete can get a little bit hot in the middle of the day.
It certainly can. It certainly can, yeah.
Let's head west for a moment. This is a place I didn't really expect to see in your 52 swims. Mount Druitt, swim number 8, Mount Druitt Swimming Centre. It's probably not on everybody's lists of swimming destinations. What pleasures did you find there?
I mean, I wanted to definitely swim the breadth and the length of Sydney. So that meant getting away from the coast because let's face it, a lot of us don't live on the coast. And we know that Western Sydney is actually the demographic hub of Sydney. So it's important, I think, to look at the swimming treasures that are in the west as well as in the east and the north and the south. So Mount Druitt's a fantastic pool. It's coming up for its 50th birthday. Very nearly closed down about 10 years ago. It was declared insolvent. But some fantastic local lobbying and a great management team and some activists worked very hard to keep the pool open. And one of the ways that they did that was to come up with novel events that were part of the Mount Druitt pool. And something very special in Mount Druitt is their dive-in. Every summer, they have a poolside movie night where they put up a big screen next to the main Olympic pool. Everyone gets their inflatable toys and their lilos and kicks back, or maybe in a deck chair by the side of the pool, and they watch a movie. So I was there for the screening of Lightyear, which is part of the Buzz Lightyear Toy Story franchise series, for the screening of the dive-in. And it was charming, fantastic to watch kids jumping around. If the story got a bit boring, they'd go for a splash or they'd do a bomb. the parents could relax and just enjoy the balmy evening. I later discovered that dive-ins are a big part of life in pools in inland towns, not only in New South Wales, but all around the country. They have them in places like the Snowy Mountains, up in the Blue Mountains, outside of Adelaide, in Victoria, in the high country of Victoria. And I think for people that don't have the luxury of access to the coast, and want to be able to cool off in a fun and novel way, the dive-in is a pretty special thing. The other thing that's amazing about Mount Druitt is in the wintertime, they go in a completely different direction. They empty out the pool and fill it up with fresh water and a whole lot of trouts from the Snowy Mountains, and people are allowed to come in. It's a big fish in August, so I think you pay $20 and you're given a fishing rod and a little spot on the side of the Olympic pool, and you're allowed to bag up to 4 fish. So these sorts of novel events and ways of bringing people into the pool have been a resounding success, and it means that Mount Druitt keeps its very loved pool. And that's important. And the other thing that's absolutely wonderful about Mount Druitt is the cultural diversity there. And of course, there's still a very strong First Nations community in Mount Druitt. So there's a lot to love about Mount Druitt, and it's one of my favourite swims in Sydney.
Let's head a little bit further west, Glenbrook Gorge, a place that holds quite a few memories for me too, as many of your swims do. Swim number 29. It's an unusual place for a midwinter swim in the lower Blue Mountains. And that trek down the river there to those rock pools, the many rock pools, the site of many knee grazers, as you mentioned and I recall. But I gather also a place for a wonderful cleansing experience in the loving embrace of Mother Nature.
Absolutely right. So the swim in Glenbrook was an impromptu swim. I'd been with a friend that morning, and I talk about that in the chapter, who'd been doing battle with the Sydney real estate market. So the book is certainly about swimming, but it's also about lots of other things. And often each particular swim or venue will throw up a story. So I talk about things like real estate and about race and racism and sexuality and depression and mental health, because certain venues lend themselves to a certain topic and a certain discussion. But Glenbrook, yeah, we'd been out house hunting. My friend had been yet again unsuccessful trying to find a place that he could afford in Sydney. And we decided to literally head for the hills. So we jumped in the car, head up to the mountains, hit Glenbrook, thought we'd go for a bushwalk, which we did. And then we stumbled upon these most amazing pools that are in the gorge itself. And the gorge is remarkable. And it's only about 15 minutes west of Penrith. But suddenly you're in this incredible World Heritage primordial bushland with incredible rock shells and walls and sandstone walls and these ancient gums and these pools that are about the size, I guess, of maybe 2 meters by 3 meters that pockmark this incredible stone gorge. And with the combination of bird song and the smell of the eucalypts and a relatively mild day, we just decided we had to jump in. And so there was this sense of surrender to the gorge, but also to the water. And particularly for my friend who was incredibly stressed, I could watch him visibly relax. And I think the healing power of the bushland, but also the healing power of the water, and the cold water, not only invigorating but cleansing, was something very, very special. And a recurring theme in the book is the healing power of the green space and the blue space. And it was very visible on that day as we surrendered to the cold water and then just enjoyed the sun, the bird song, the bushland after the swim.
Let's head a little bit south, Burning Palms. It's got a very interesting history too, for many people and for many different reasons. But what did you find there in your autumn swim, number 15?
A couple of things. The beaches of the Royal National Park, places like Gary and Burning Palms and Era, are famous for the Depression era coastal dwellers in the 20s and particularly in the 30s during the Depression. Lots of Sydney-siders who'd been forced out of really housing in the city because of the high cost of housing and the economic problems that were occurring at the time, took refuge in places like the Burning Palms area, and they built these coastal shacks, and they were known as shackies, and they were pretty rudimentary little places. People lived a very simple and a pretty tough life. They eked out a living fishing and sometimes growing a few veggies. And if they needed supplies, they had a long walk up to the roads that connected the national park to the rest of Sydney. So those coastal shacks are still very much evident in Burning Palms and in other parts of the Royal National Park. And the people that have inherited them can continue to live there, but they're heritage listed, so they can't really be changed in a great way. So it's a fascinating place in terms of the history. Also, what I've discovered as well, I used to go to Burning Palms when I was a teenager and a young man at uni. And like you say, it was a bit of an epic trip to get down there. You'd have to walk quite a bit from the car park, but you'd be rewarded by this incredibly pristine, rough, raw beach. There's nothing there. There's no surf life-saving club. There's no shop to buy anything. So you've got to lug it all down in a backpack if you want to take food or drink. But it's a wonderful, far away, remote place. And the name Burning Palms to me is so evocative. But I had been away for a while and I came back and I was astonished to find that there was this brand new path heading down from the car park to Burning Palms. And more surprisingly, there were thousands of people walking in a conga line along the coast to Burning Palms. And I thought, what's on? What's happening? Why is it that all these people are coming down to a place that not that long ago was a pretty well kept secret? It turns out that Burning Palms wasn't their final destination, that they were going on to the figure eight rock pools, which were further along a little bit the coast. The figure eight rock pools have become a bit of an Instagram sensation. And so you've got this bizarre situation where lots of people are coming from all over Sydney and in fact all over the world, walking into this, what was once a very rough, rugged path in order to line up single file, hop in the rock pool, the figure eight rock pool, get their selfie, put it up on Insta, and then go back again. And they're sort of almost oblivious to the wonders of Burning Palms Beach itself. So I just find that remarkable and a bit crazy. And I guess it speaks to the social media era that we live in, that there's this sense that if we follow what we're told in terms of what we should see, often we miss the big picture. And so by trying to get to the figure eight pool, a lot of people ignore what I think is the better reason for being in that part of the Royal National Park, which is the very beautiful and pristine beach at Burning Palms.
Let's come back to the city. Victoria Park and the pool that sits there, an urban junction that a lot of people would have passed through, but a significant place for First Nations people, but a place of contradictions for you.
Victoria Park's a pool I love and I go there often. I live in Surrey Hills, so it's not too far from me. It's somewhere that's sort of an oasis in the middle of, as you say, a very busy junction between City Road and Parramatta Road, just next door to Sydney Uni. But I was astonished as I researched a little bit into Vic Park to find out that it was Blackwattle Creek or Blackwattle Bay, which was an important water source and junction for First Nation people. I spoke to a remarkable man, Brett Livy, who's a Cooma man, and he is involved with a digital company that illustrates Sydney before the time of first contact. His company is called Virtual Songlines, and he's made some remarkable digital movies about what Sydney might have looked like before the first impacts of colonisation. He also suggests that that area around Vic Park was part of a major walking path that First Nations people took to go west and to go south from the area that we now call Circular Quay. So it was certainly an important junction for First Nations people. So there is this remarkable First Nations history to Victoria Park. And appropriately on the 26th of January, which is Australia Day, but also called Survival Day, we have the Yabun Festival in Vic Park. And that's a celebration of First Nations culture, civilization, history, and also its enduring resilience. Really beautiful day. There's song, there's music, there's dancing, there's leadership forums. And the diversity and the variety of First Nations lives are expressed in that day. But then afterwards, it's back to business as usual. So while there's this remarkable history to Victoria Park, that's forgotten most of the year. And there's a couple of other acute ironies in Victoria Park that make me wonder why we've kind of forgotten to truly acknowledge the First Nations connection to this part of Sydney. So, for example, there's a totem pole that was put up in the 1960s in honour of National Timber Week, which I just found gobsmacking because it sits pretty much in a place where there was this incredible pristine forest. The forest was cleared. We had a paddock, we had exhibition grounds, I think we had an army camp, we had the university and the pool. So the land has been cleared and changed in all sorts of ways by settlers and colonizers since first contact. But here we have this First Nations reference to people in Canada with this totem pole sitting amongst cleared land in celebration of National Timber Week in 1964, yet nothing really telling us about the history of Vic Park and the First Nations history of Vic Park. So it's a place of contested history, but other than Yabun, I think we need to be able to acknowledge that in a more profound way, 365 days a year and not just on Australia Day, Survival Day.
Let's move from, well, what might be the sublime to the ridiculous, the ubiquitous backyard pool. Iconic in some ways in Australian culture, a pleasure and a pain. A pleasure if you are invited over or if you steal a secret swim when the neighbours are away, but actually a pain if you've got to maintain it. What's the attraction? What compels Australians to install a backyard pool?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, what do pools tell us about ourselves? Well, I think they're a hub, they're a meeting place, and that was certainly true for my parents. And I talk about their experience of having a backyard pool, and I think, like many Australians, it was a marker of newfound prosperity and aspiration. When I was a little kid, the novelty of a backyard pool was profound. I knew no one that had a backyard pool, and I talk about breaking into the local mutual pool showrooms not far from where we lived and climbing over a fence with my brothers and our dog for the novelty of jumping into an in-ground pool. And I often think back what my reaction would be now if I saw these urchins, kids leaping over a fence and jumping in a pool showroom. But that was indicative of the fact that not many people had pools. But yeah, as I became an adult and as my parents became older and my father's fortunes sort of reflected the fortunes of the country in the 90s and the new prosperity, they got a backyard pool. And I know for my dad in particular, it was a gathering place. It was intergenerational. There was this sense of privacy where you could relax, you could socialize, you could, I guess, let yourself go. You didn't worry about maybe how you looked or how you acted because there was this sense of privacy with the fence around you and the secret nature of a backyard pool, I think, appeals. We're hardwired in a way to water. There's something that cuts through not just Australian culture, but I think most cultures where we equate water with relaxation and well-being. You think about if you've had a rough day, often people's antidote to that is to run a hot bath. So there's something I think innately comforting. And I think a pool takes that to the next level. It locks into domestic comfort and security, but then there's this sense of privacy and of comfort and of conviviality and of intergenerational pleasure. And I think there's a generosity as well to people that have pools. They want people around. They want to, host the Christmas dinner because, I know, and my extended family, my in-laws, it's the sister that has the pool that usually hosts Christmas. And there's that sort of sense of let's get around here because we've got the pool and we can all relax. So people that have pools, as you say, they can be a gift, but they're a burden. And that's reflected in the fact that lots of people, especially older people, now are filling in their pools and questioning the wisdom of a pool for, the cost, maybe for the environmental impact, and also just the maintenance and the time involved. So there's something we love. They can be something we hate. Lots of people say the happiest day in your life is the day you get your pool. The second happiest day is the day you fill it in. So I don't know.
Your favourite swim and your final swim in the book, swim number 52, Wiley's Bath in South Coogee. Why is that a favourite?
Maybe before I say why it's my favorite, it might be worthwhile to ask the question, why do we swim in the first place? And this gets back to your initial question of what is swimming to me? I think swimming, there's a number of reasons why we swim. Firstly, we swim to survive, to make sure that we don't drown, but also because of things like rips. So Australia's a dangerous place. We've got spiders, we've got snakes, we've got crocodiles, we've got blue-ringed octopuses, but all of those combined don't claim the same number of lives that rips do. So there's a safety factor to going to a beautiful ocean pool such as Wiley's. And I'm drawn to that. It's a haven. It allows me to connect to the big blue, but in a safe way. And there's something quite grand and remarkable about Wiley's. It's 50 yards long. It's a remarkable heritage pool. It was built by the father of Mina Wiley. And Mina Wiley and her great friend and rival, Fanny Durack, were the first two Australian women to ever compete in the Olympic Games as swimmers, and the first two women ever to win a gold and a silver medal. So there's this fantastic heritage and legacy that goes with Wiley's Baths. And that continues today. There's certainly competitive swimming that continues at Wiley's. So there's that sense of swimming safely for survival. There's that sense of swimming in a beautiful heritage spot. There's also a sense of well-being that comes from Wiley's. And I think what I would call flow, this sense of just surrendering to the big blue. It has the most amazing aspect. It looks out east to Wedding Cake Island and to the Pacific beyond. And I think there's really not a more beautiful view in Sydney. If I have friends from overseas, one of the first places I take them to is Wiley's, simply because of its grandeur and its beauty. And then on top of that, the icing on the cake, if you like, is that it has this most remarkable Edwardian infrastructure. So there's this fantastic boardwalk that sits above the pool that makes it really timeless. And it's just the perfect place, not only to have a swim, but then to sit afterwards and to chat, to have a coffee. So I think all those things combine speak to why we swim. We swim for well-being, we swim for connection, we swim for community, we swim for heritage, and we literally swim for survival. And so Wiley sums up all of those. On top of that, there's some profound personal connections that I have at Wiley's. And one of them involves a very dear friend of mine who sadly died before her time of what she called an unlucky tumour. And so her and I used to hang out at Wiley's together, and she was a hoot. She was from Brooklyn, very sassy woman who had a fantastic sense of humour and was great fun. And she used to say that the thing that gave her most pleasure in life was an appointment with Dr. Wiley's. So it was appropriate that when she passed, a group of us got together and we commemorated her wake at Wiley's. And not far from Wiley's, we scattered her ashes into the Pacific. So for me, there's strong emotional connection to Wiley's. But I think that aside, like all the other magnificent ocean pools, not just in Sydney, but all over New South Wales, there's 1,000 reasons to love Wiley's.
Chris, Swimming Sydney brought back so many memories for me, as it will for many others. It makes for truly wonderful reading, and thank you so much for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you very much, Greg. A great pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about the book. Really happy you enjoyed it.
I've been talking to Chris Baker about his new book, Swimming Sydney, A Tale of 52 Swims. It's published by New South Books, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading Podcast was brought to you by Book People Gift Cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.